Welcome to episode 226 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm talking with teacher Amy Stohs about the 7 principles that absolutely saved her this school year in terms of work-life balance and how she's going to carry them over into future school years. Visit truthforteachers.com to get the transcript or find our Truth for Teachers podcast community on Facebook. A big thanks to Advancement Courses for sponsoring today's show. You can earn graduate credits or CEUs through over 280 online PD courses in 20 different subject areas for K-12 teachers. Everything is online and self-paced, and you have 6 months to complete. Right now, you can save 20% off any course with the code TRUTH. That's less than $120 per graduate credit hour. To learn more, visit advancementcourses.com. Teachers, if you're looking for new ways to elevate your classroom and accelerate learning, then listen up. Check out RISE Math and ELA program bundles from McGraw-Hill at mheonline.com/RISE1. These programs for grades 3 to 8 identify learning gaps and create a unique learning sequence and pace for each child. Covering over 1,000 key grade level learning objectives in math and ELA, teachers get real-time feedback and progress. Plus, kids can access RISE offline too through the app. For just $30 a year, you or your school can purchase a subscription for 5 students, making it perfect for intervention and support for kids who are struggling. Just go to mheonline.com/RISE1 to learn more about all the different packages available and how RISE can help your students. That's MHE for McGraw-Hill Education, online.com/RISE1 for the RISE Math and ELA program bundles from McGraw-Hill. So my guest today is Amy Stohs, who is currently a 2nd grade teacher in Northern Virginia and was named Teacher of the Year in 2019 while she was teaching 6th grade. Amy's experience is unique in that she has now taught both elementary and middle school in a pandemic. So she's experienced the challenges of working with both younger and older students in face-to-face, remote, and hybrid learning. Her experience is also unique in that she's been an active participant in my 40-Hour Teacher Workweek program for the last few years. And I've been really impressed by the ideas and resources that she shares in that community. So at the start of this school year, I reached out to Amy and I asked her to join the 40-hour team and help create the adaptations for the program for remote and hybrid learning. So if you're part of 40-hour or the grad program and you have loved the remote and hybrid bonuses this year, you are about to hear directly from the teacher who brainstormed them with me. So let's jump in and Amy will share her 7 tips. So Amy, let's start by talking about some guiding principles that you've really honed over this past school year. These are things that worked for you pre-pandemic, they've worked during the pandemic, and things that you want to carry over into post-pandemic teaching, whenever that is, and whatever that looks like, whatever we're going into for next year. So the first one that you had identified was do what has to get done, not what you want to get done.
Yeah, so one of the things that I noticed with all of the distance learning and virtual resources out there was teachers were just making the most amazing things. Like all of these cool Bitmoji classrooms, and I would find and use some of them. They were just like so many cool things. And I wanted desperately to like dive into all of that kind of fun stuff and like look at all these pretty activities, and just there was a lot of really creative, cool things out there. So there was so much I wanted to do, but I knew that honestly, like I couldn't do that and still kind of maintain my own frame of mind, still be kind of healthy with my work hours, still adjust to, like, I taught a new grade level this year. And so I knew that I couldn't just focus on all of that, that I really needed to focus on the essentials and like what I had to do and the frameworks that were going to really support me in the long run and not just be like one activity that I could do that day. So I really had to focus on like what was going to be necessary.
Yeah, that's such a great point because it's easy to focus on the stuff you want to get done, like the fun stuff, the creative stuff. But the thing that I realized was sometimes I was putting that extra effort into getting creative with my work when if I really step back and say, actually, I think I'd rather be using this time for something else. Like there's other things that I'd like to get creative with. I'd like to get creative, in the kitchen with cooking, with painting. Like there's other things that I like to spend time on. So kind of taking a step back and thinking, if I'm going to go down this rabbit hole and I'm going to do something that's not actually necessary, do I want to funnel that energy into a lesson or a resource, or is there some other area of my life that I want to do it in?
Yeah, exactly. Like I want to make sure that I'm putting that creative energy towards something that will fill me up, which could be teaching too.
Yes.
But I want to be mindful of that.
Yes. Being really intentional about it. The next one is to backward design your classroom management. Figure out the goal and then decide what action steps will get you there.
Yeah, so we talk about backwards design with curriculum all the time, right? Like think about what's the rubric going to look at and what's the final goal of the project, or what will the end of unit assessment look like, and then what do we need to teach to get there. But I think that we also need to backwards design like the classroom management. What sort of vision do we have for the classroom? So if I'm thinking about a classroom routine or something, I kind of think about, what do I want to get to? What's my goal? So for instance, in in the fall, I knew that I was going to be teaching online for many more hours than I was in the spring. And I knew I was going to have to break up that day differently somehow. So I really wanted to get to virtual stations to have kids doing different activities in breakout rooms and to be able to do independent work. And I thought that that might be kind of hard with my second graders, teaching them like how to do all of this work on their own. So I wanted to make sure that they could like get to all of those websites, ask for help the way that I wanted them to, with like little hand raises and using the chat appropriately. I wanted to get all of those procedures in place so that when we transitioned into virtual stations, it was going to be smooth. And that was such a good investment of time. I mean, it took me probably 6 weeks to kind of get to where I wanted it to be. Even really more like a few months before things were super smooth and they just knew what to do and didn't need hardly any reminders from me. And that has paid off as well, kind of moving concurrently. So where I have kids in person 2 different days and then kids at home, and then they flip flop. So I actually see all of my students in person, but they just flip flop 2 days and 2 days. And so when I kind of was transitioning into that concurrent teaching model, I did the same thing. I kind of thought about, what are the small groups that I want to look like? How do I want to structure my class? And I laid out kind of like, this is the week I want to get to, and what are the things I need to teach in order to get there. So I needed to teach a lot more procedures coming, kind of leading up into what I envisioned. So each week I'm working a little bit more towards that goal of like, what are the steps I needed to get to that final outcome.
And this obviously takes longer than just diving in, figuring out what do I need to do for tomorrow. And I have a feeling this leads us into your third strategy, which is go slow to go fast. That's what you're describing here, right?
Yeah. So the educational system wants us to go fast. They want us to just kind of jump in and teach lots of skills and make sure that testing gets done. And even now I'm feeling that kind of pressure of like, make use of the time that we have them in person now, like implement all of these interventions, make sure that they're meeting their goals. And, so that pressure can be a lot, but like building blocks matter and essential skills really do matter. So you need to kind of go slow in order to go fast later, because kids are going to get paid back in like huge dividends if they really understand essential skills. And you're going to be able to go so much faster with things if you spend the time on procedures, if you spend the time on what you really want to get out of class, if you really do that sort of backwards design thought process, then it will go faster for you. And if you dive kind of deep into something, you'll get so much more out of it. I was in this one training that had us focusing on essential skills, and they gave us this list of standards from a driver's ed class. And so it had like 12 or 15 or something standards. It was just a page long. And our task as teachers was to look at this and think, if we wanted someone to go onto the road tomorrow, a teenager new to driving, and they're going out onto the road tomorrow, which standards do we want them to make sure that they have? For sure. Mm-hmm. And it was so easy to look at that list and be like, they need to know how the brake system works so that they don't get into accidents. And they need to know, kind of like how certain operations of the car work. Do they need to know everything about insurance policies right now? No, like they can kind of figure that out later. Like there were so many things listed. It was like, of course someone needs to know that in order to drive the car. And the other ones, not as important. And I think that when we look at our standards, we need to have the same lens of like, what is absolutely necessary for them to move into the next school year, for them to move into the world in general, and which are ones that maybe they could pick up later. And that's the way I want my classroom to be. Like, I want it to be a place of like thinking and actually understanding. I don't want it to just be this like hectic busyness of running through, worksheets and activities and just sort of like getting through. I want it to be a place of, presence and like actual thinking and comprehension. And for me, like all of those thinking routines, it's about depth. It's about slowness. It's about giving kids time to actually process what they're learning. And it really very much like revolutionized some of my practice because I started embedding reflection journals, and I'm so much less anxious as a teacher because of that, because I'm thinking about what do I need to go slow with, what matters, and like investing my time into those things that matter and not just rushing ahead to rush ahead.
What would you say to a teacher who's listening to this and thinking, yes, I agree 100%. That's exactly what I want to do. But I feel all this pressure from my district to keep to the pacing guide, the curriculum map, to stay at the same place that my grade level team is. Mm-hmm. And I feel rushed. And so I rush my students, and I don't want to do that. How do you avoid that in your classroom?
Yeah. I will say that I'm super lucky because I have a great administration that embraces thinking routines.
Nice.
And so they kind of like what I'm doing, but they do feel that same stress. I do keep up with pacing guides. I'm a little behind now, but that's because I just had to move into concurrent instruction and basically start the year over again. But typically, I actually am on track with my units, and I know that I can always embed something later. Like I can come back to a concept later in the year and like cycle back into something. I plan in a way that builds in buffer days, and then I'm able to stay on track with my plans because those buffer days, they literally disappear. So it's, it's just, it's meant to be a way that I kind of follow along things. And if other people on my team want to do an extra activity or want to do other things, that's fine. I let them, I'm not going to argue with someone about that they should be exactly like me. I if they want to do extra activities and plan more, which I mean, other people do. I've had that many times. And that's fine. That's fine with me. I choose to cut things. I choose to do a little bit less and to do it a little deeper. And that's kind of the environment that I want to set in my classroom. And so I'm still doing the same topics. I'm just doing maybe one less thing each, kind of content area.
Yes, exactly. Choosing less activities, not packing the lesson plan so full. And I want to hear you talk more about buffer days too, because that is a concept that I'm really passionate about. We come back to that over and over again in 40 Hour about, having buffer time in your lessons, in your day, and then also in your lesson plan. So there is a day each week, or maybe each month or every other week where you don't have either anything planned or you have far less planned. It's sort of like a review and a catch-up day because there's always things that throw us behind. And if we don't build that time in, then you're going to feel like you're just falling further and further behind. But there's always questions about, okay, what does that actually look like? You can't just have a lesson plan where, you submit lesson plans where there's a whole day where there's nothing in there. So tell us what that looks like for you.
Yeah, so I often will kind of label something as like a reflection day of prompts in my lesson plans, and then I'll know that like that's what I need to do, or do game day or review day or something where I know that I need to kind of come back to that concept. So that's sort of what a buffer day. I don't literally write buffer day.
Right.
It's usually what that looks like in my plans. And I already know kind of what are some of the games that I could just list off for myself, or what are some little, reflection thinking routines that I can just literally list. It's like, this is what I could do. If I have the time.
So the idea really is you're just creating some margin for yourself. So if there is a fire drill, an assembly, a student gets sick, like there's just all kinds of things that happen that there are lesson plans behind, then it makes it, you don't have to quite cut as much. And at least that's my approach, and tell me if that's how it is for you. But I felt like I really tried to focus as a teacher on just including the most essential activities, the things that would make the biggest impact for kids, not cramming the lesson plan with everything we could do. But, as you were saying, not just what you want to get done, what has to get done, what are the most important things. And then hopefully when I got to that buffer day, there wouldn't be so many things that I felt like I had to catch up on. Or if I had those extra 15 minutes built into my lesson, we could then go deeper on a reflection question, or kids could share out some of their thinking, or, we could do some sort of wrap up in a way that if I had over planned the lesson, that deeper thinking and reflection time wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah. Also, what I would do is like set aside a day for just conferences or something, or before a new reading unit or something, I set aside a day that's like just book talks and, kind of looking at and choosing new books for book clubs. So that's all we're doing that day. And so it's a different kind of day. To me, that also is like a buffer day. Like, I'm not trying to cram that in or like do, a whole bunch of book talks and have them just select it by this date. I'm giving them the whole class period to decide, and they can watch the book trailers I've pulled, and that gives me some space, and I don't have to do this like formal pre-reading activity that maybe other people are doing. I can just let them have time to like look through books. And then for, writing, as we're nearing the end of a unit, I can just spend an entire day doing, like a check-in of the class and do just a bunch of quick conferences. And my goal can be to get to every single kid during that block of time and just check in on like, where is everyone, so that no one is turning in an incomplete project. So to me, those are kind of like planned buffer days of, I'm trying to ensure success, kind of before or wrapping up a unit. It's like almost like a formative assessment with like a conference day or something. I'm just spending the whole day doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very justifiable,
Absolutely.
to if I needed to like explain my plans. It's not my normal day, but it's very justifiable.
Let's talk about your next tip, which is instead of always doing your best, ask, what do I have to give today?
Yeah, so I'm like a bit of a perfectionist. I can be pretty like high achieving and intense. So I personally feel like when someone tells me, do your best, like that's stressful for me. I'm like,
Mm.
but that's a lot, like if I were to do, if I were to do my best, like that would be a lot of work. so, so it feels like that's just too much. It's kind of misleading because other people are trying to say that, like, just do your best and you'll be fine. And it's like, but I won't be fine. like it's, so something I also used to ask myself is like, okay, can I do this badly? Like, can I just do it? Does it have to be done to my best, or can I just do this badly? Can I think about a limit that I'm placing on what my best means? So that question of like, what do I have to give today? What does my day look like? How do I feel? How can I think about not just how many hours I'm going to give to work today, but what is the energy that I can give to work today? What sort of task can I do effectively? Because different tasks require very different energy. Making a whole bunch of copies is a little different than planning a unit, or, and grading kind of measly small assignments is very different from grading a project. So what can I really give today? That's something, I think that's a phrase I've heard from a couple different people, like Glennon Doyle, I think, has written about that. I listen to the podcast Everything Happens with Kate Bowler, which I love, and she talks a lot about that. Like, what do I have to give today? What can I offer the world today?
I love that approach. And I think, that's one of the cool things about being a teacher. I mean, not everyone has this amount of flexibility, but for me, like I had the ability to look at my lesson plans for the day and say, you know what, I just don't have the energy for that today. It is a huge, noisy, loud, messy group project. And I'm just not feeling it. Like for whatever reason, my mood just doesn't match that. I'm going to shift that. I'm going to shift it to the afternoon. I'm going to flip flop today's lessons and tomorrow. I'm going to sort of move things around to think about what do I have to give today? If I need the kids to be working on something a little quieter, they can do that for a while. If I need morning work to extend for an extra 10 minutes because I have, this email that I really didn't want to have to respond to, but, it's very urgent and I need to get back to this person right away. I can have the kids work on that, and really thinking about your own energy levels and incorporating that into your lesson plans instead of trying to always see a lesson plan as like this fixed entity. Like I planned it and therefore we have to do it exactly in this order, in this way. Because if you're not in that headspace, you're not going to do a great job with it. And I found that it's much better to give myself, a lower key activity and kind of ease into things or shift to a different headspace. Maybe, I just didn't sleep well the night before and I'm just really tired. If I wait and do a more high energy activity the following day, it's going to go so much better for my kids because I'm going to be so much more patient and enthusiastic. And I think taking that kind of flexibility based on what I have to give today is a really cool aspect of teaching that not everyone can say about their jobs.
Yeah. I mean, I love that flexibility. That's actually been one of the hardest parts of like the past month. I feel like that flexibility has been a bit drained out of me. Like every minute feels a little too scheduled for me. But one of the things I kind of thought about sharing later, I think, was, kind of look for flexibility where it does exist. So like I have a little 15-minute break kind of built in, and, I can't plan in my room right now because specials are in my room and it's only 30 minutes. And, so by the time I leave and go somewhere and find a spot that's like semi-quiet, I like can't really get anything done. So, what can I do with that time that is still useful to me? Maybe it's not grading or planning, but what can I do with that planning time that exists? If it's just checking email, it has to happen at some time. So that's okay for me to use my planning time to like sit and breathe, and maybe, I can rearrange my day in different ways. So there's always some flexibility. I have less than I feel like I used to, but it still exists. And so I have to like look for the little pockets of flexibility that I do have.
Yes, exactly. Because every teacher has it someplace. It may not be as much as you want, but really focusing on the areas that you do have some control is just so much more empowering.
Mm-hmm.
I want to also comment on what you said about as a perfectionist, this idea of, asking yourself, or telling yourself just do your best is not helpful. I think that's so important to illuminate because as a fellow type A person, yes, my best is way more than I think what the average person's best is. And I like the idea of asking, like, can I just do this badly? Like, sometimes I just tell myself, like, Angela, just do a crappy job. Like, just get in there and just get it done. Just get it done. And I find that because I am a perfectionist, my idea of a crappy job is actually a lot of people's idea of a really good job. My
No.
standards are so high that, either one of two things will happen. Either I'll get in there and I'll be like, actually, this is pretty good, Angela. Like this is going to be right on par from what people would expect to see here. Or I'll get in there and realize this task was just not important. I was completely stressing out about like, I had to do it this certain way. I get in there and it's like, none of that actually needs to be done. I can just do this one little thing right here. And that's absolutely fine. No one's going to be able to tell the difference. It doesn't even matter. I had built it up in my head as this like big all-encompassing thing, like, oh, I have to do this, but this also needs to be in place and I need to do this. And then when I get into it, which I can only do because I've given myself permission to do it badly, I realize actually none of that was necessary. It's a much simpler task than what I had built up in my head. So that may not apply if you're a non-perfectionist, but for the people who are really very hard on themselves and have very high expectations for themselves, I think this is so important to talk about.
Yes, absolutely.
So your next tip is when you have tried it all, try one thing.
Yeah, so I kind of got like this advice from my principal. She didn't say it in exactly that way, but I had a really rough year one year with just my class just had a lot going on. If you can think of literally any kind of like problem, any sort of academic need, like whatever you could come up with, it was in that class. And so they were great. They taught me so much. I like love them to pieces, right? That's the way you feel about kids that you just pour your heart into. So when I was just kind of falling apart with like these different behavior plans I had kids on, and it felt like nothing was working. They were like frustrated with me, and they had come to rely on me a lot and were calling out, like, Miss Stohs, I called your name like 4 times and you didn't come to me yet. And I'm like literally working with another student, and they just were kind of being like mean to each other at different times. And I'm just crying in my principal's office. Like I'm spent. They're constantly pulling at me. And she was like, well, first of all, they're treating you like you're their mom. Like that's what kids say, like, Mom, you didn't come when I wanted you to, and you didn't do this thing that, I asked you to. They're kind of like reaching out in that way. And so instead of looking for like that better thing or that like magic bullet that I was so expecting myself to get to, that I was gonna like, that whole like savior complex, I was just gonna fix them all, and she just was reminding me, like, instead of trying to do all of these things, you're doing so much. Instead of doing all of this, focus on one thing. Do the one thing that you think is going to like make a difference, that you've already seen a little bit of progress with. And so instead of changing my behavior plan like 5 different times. I just stuck with one thing and I just kept the same thing for weeks, and I didn't change it. And, I'm not going to say that suddenly at the end of the year, everything was totally fine, which is good, because we as teachers are not saviors. So that would have been a problem if I'd kind of ended the year of oh, look what I did. Mm-hmm. But at the end of that year, I was able to be okay, you can do one thing well, and that's okay. That's the way I feel about this year too, is instead of trying to do all of the things that I could be doing, focus on what I can do well. This year, I've really tried to embrace just doing a few things well, getting them books and supplies, really focusing on small groups and how can I have different kids doing different activities at the same time. Stations, really letting morning meeting be the full time that I can devote to it. And, just letting my teammate make copies and not caring. I don't need to check her work. I don't need to look it over. I can just accept things without needing to check it. She can completely handle ordering the books that we got through our grant, and I don't need to check over or research more books. I can just let her list be the list, and it's going to be great. It's I can just let it go. Just focus on doing some things well. So yeah, that there was something that clicked for me when my principal was sort of just pick something, that I kind of came up with this phrase in my head of when I've tried to do all of these things, just do one thing. Do one thing.
And that really leads to the next strategy, which is to shift focus from finding something new and different to doubling down on what we know kids need.
Yeah. So, we all know what we want kids in class to need, right? We all know what they need. We know that they need reflection time and quiet time. They need mindfulness. They need to be read aloud to. They need reassurance. They need connection. They need to talk to other people. They need repetition. They need, breaks. They need meaningful work to do. They need to feel like they belong. We know what they need. It's not some sort of mystery. Anyone who's been in the classroom kind of working with kids knows the things that are good and knows what's working. And so, the reason we get frustrated as educators is because we feel like other people are telling us things that don't work. Mm-hmm. But, we know what they need. So it's about kind of embracing that and doubling down on what we know kids do need. I mentioned Kate Bowler's podcast before, and she said that phrase, show me who to love. And I have embraced that a lot this year with my students too, of who do I need to talk today? Who do I need to let talk? Who do I need to listen to? Whose parents should I, kind of just reach out to? Who do I need to see in a conference? If this kind of funny story, literally while I was being evaluated, a bunch of kids in my class wanted to show me these virtual gingerbread houses that we'd made during morning meeting the previous day. And so they're all, oh, can I show you my gingerbread house? Miss Stohs, can I show you my gingerbread house? And I was really tempted to just be no, we have to do the math because I'm being evaluated right now. How do you not know this? But I was oh, they really want to show me. And this is how I've been doing it all year. I respond to them if they want to talk to me. I have to set limits around that, obviously, or we'd never get to any math. But I let them show me. I let them show me a couple of their gingerbread houses. And I said, we'd get to the rest of them tomorrow. And my favorite strategy is jotting down their names on a Post-it note and either holding it up, to the camera in person and being look, see, I got your names. It's okay. um, we'll get there. We'll get there another day. And so, like, show me who to love, show me how to like listen. And that's sort of a prayer of sorts, of thinking about what can I do with intentionality. Who do I need to go to? I feel like I'm an intuitive person and an intuitive teacher, and I've never quite been that person who like just goes straight down the list alphabetically for like reading or writing conferences. I just sort of sporadically go around and I keep track, so I know, that I haven't missed someone. But that kind of responsiveness is part of what I think makes me a good teacher. Like, it's not a weakness to kind of just go to who needs it, or to take the pause and change plans. Like, to me, that's not a weakness, kind of going off script or not following the list. That's a strength.
Yes, that's being responsive to the kids. And I know what you mean about, intuiting who needs what. And I think when you train your mind on this idea of show me who to love, you're training your focus on noticing that aspect, which students really need me right now. And you start to read the energy in the room. You start to notice more things that if you're just totally focused on the lesson plan, you're not going to notice. So I think that's really powerful. So your next tip is to look for moments of joy and find the fun.
Yes. So I am like a huge fan of responsive classroom and morning meetings and doing lots of games. I was a summer camp counselor for many years, and I love little like games and activities. And so I've sought out, kind of fun projects and little, kind of silly activities, and just anything to add some lightness. It makes me happy. It makes kids happy. Doing just any kind of active game. I really like racked my brain to think about what are games we can play while social distancing. What are things we can do, outside? What are virtual activities we can do that work? And like, I kind of write a little blog for fun, and that's mostly what I've written about this year. It's not like anything kind of heavy. It's all just games. And like, what can we do that's going to be fun? Like, we have to look for the moments of joy and like create moments that are going to like bring laughter. We can't let that go.
You've been part of the 40-Hour Teacher Workweek for quite a while now, and you have not only seen the changes and evolution over the years, but you've also been part of it. You have been instrumental in helping me adapt the program for all of the remote and hybrid learning. So anyone listening to this who is part of 40-Hour, all those remote and hybrid bonuses from like October, November-ish on have been in large part due to the work of Amy. Amy, you have been my eyes and ears on the ground. You have been the person testing this stuff out and adapting all of these principles and systems for the new changes for virtual and hybrid learning. So I feel like you know these systems so well. You've applied them at an elementary setting and in middle school. I'm so grateful for all of your support and help in making sure that the program was useful for teachers during all of the COVID changes. So I would love to hear just a little bit about your experience working on that and what has been the most helpful part for you of 40-Hour.
I love the club, and I've, kind of appreciated taking the time to reflect on how it would apply to remote and hybrid teaching. This year I did that some just transitioning in the spring as to how that was going to work. So, it's been good for me too, to really like think through how the club can help in multiple situations. After a year, this was a little while ago, but after a year in the club and then like a year in the graduate program, you had asked teachers in the club to like reflect on what they got out of it. And I think it was through that like hashtag 40 hour gave me.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that I wrote about then, I think are still really true. Like more confidence teaching. I just felt like what I was doing was the best use of my time, that I was doing kind of what mattered. I had more acceptance of myself and like what I could do. Something that's not related to teaching, just kind of spilled over from that mindset, is I had been working a couple years ago now on this mural at my church, and I painted like this underwater scene, and I painted the hallway going down to it, and then like across the wall and everything. And I had these like very grand, illustrious, like fantastic vision of what this was going to be. And it turned out really well. Like people were, like shocked and like, oh, that's like really fantastic. And it was hard for me at first to change kind of my vision a little bit, because that whole like, lowering your standards where like no one else will notice but you. Nobody else knew really what I was what I was thinking. When I proposed the idea to the church that I was going to paint this, and it had to go through like this super long, ridiculous process to get approved. And they bought my like paint and supplies. And so when I was thinking through that, I really had this vision, but yeah, nobody else knew what I was planning. It turned out great. Like, but it was something that really I did get out of the club in terms of that mindset of like, yeah, like this is good. This is acceptable. Like I can look for my strengths. I can let go of things that aren't working. I can kind of, move on from maybe something else I had in mind, and it's still really good. So that like that acceptance, that confidence really did come from all of those mindset shifts just over and over again, kind of slowly seeping in. I mean, the club just has like a million little hacks and like just little like life hacks and tips. I felt like my parent-teacher communication improved, and that I was more able to be responsive to them. There's a lot of systems in the club, like those, report card comments and conferencing tips, how to, I started using one of those apps to, because the club just sort of like propelled me towards that. I was like, yep, this is great. And I felt like parents really appreciated it. I was able to solicit some feedback from them just on homework, and kind of adjusting my expectations related to what they said. So all of that I felt like was a little bit better. Student-led conferences I had already been doing a little bit of that beforehand, but the club just gives you like more resource, more guidelines. Like, and it also, for me, it affirmed so much of what I was doing and like clarified so much of what I was doing, that it wasn't like I was doing anything so crazy different, but it was like, oh, this is that little like window I needed to see how somebody else was doing it. And this was what I needed to help clarify what I was already doing. And it's so helpful to like get an affirmation of like, okay, this is what I was really looking for. Or, oh, it's nice to have this document I can just print out. Before it was just like sketched out on my little Post-it notes, but oh, look at this paper. This is organized in a way I want it to be. It gave me a sense better of like boundaries, really like clarified for me the wisdom of like when I can say yes to something and be joyful about that yes, and not resentful. Like giving that power of like kind of control, a permission to focus on my passions and what I really loved. That idea of like a separation between the necessary and the real work from like hobby and fun work so that I wasn't just letting everything bleed over together, but really like, this is what's necessary to do. And if I work longer on other things that are not necessary, that's my choice. And I can say yes, I can say no, but like, that's my decision. This isn't something that I have to do. So really being able to separate, this is what I have to do, this is what I don't have to do. And I'd done classroom jobs before, but the club really, really made it better. Like, that's another thing, is the club just made things better, because it's not just taking your ideas either, Angela, which are fantastic, but it's also like the whole community of other teachers and seeing how other people have applied the same concepts. And so it just lifted the level of my teaching so much, because it just made it all just a little bit better, a little bit cleaner. And then I was happier. So, that's a big deal to like be a happier, better teacher.
Yeah. And that makes a bigger impact than I think a lot of folks give credit for. Happy teachers, happy kids.
Yeah.
What would you say to a teacher who hasn't taken 40-hour, but isn't sure if it's something they'd really utilize? That's something that I hear a lot when people are on the fence, like, well, I have to make this investment of money, but I don't know if it's really going to be stuff that I couldn't just figure it out on my own. Could I just Google it? And would I actually make time to use the program? Would I actually get my money's worth? Would I get a benefit? Because I'm already so busy, hence I need the program. Is this actually, going to be something I'd make good use of?
Yeah. So, I originally joined the club because I love productivity stuff. And I thought, oh, this sounds so fun. Sounds so interesting. And I also knew that I wasn't at my breaking point by any means in terms of working too many hours. But I was working probably, 60-hour weeks more often. And like 50 hours was my low, so I was working definitely more. And I knew that I couldn't sustain that forever. I was still pretty early in my career when I joined, and I just knew that it wasn't going to be something that I could just keep up for all of eternity. But I love teaching, and I didn't want overwork and burnout to be the reason that I had to leave. So I wanted to make sure that I was arming myself with the ability to limit my hours and the ability to not be, a bitter, burned out teacher. So when the first couple months, I really dove in over the summer and planned things, and I looked at all of the resources. So at the beginning, I was pretty intensely kind of looking at it. But it was over summer break, and I was just, kind of getting ready for the school year and doing it. It didn't feel like I was doing it that much because I was still on vacation for most of the time. And then there were many weeks and months though, where all I did was listen to the audio. That's it. I had a routine where on Saturday mornings, I always do yoga in the morning and listen to podcasts. And so instead of that, on Saturdays, I just listened to the club audio, and I did my yoga and my exercises and stretches while I listened to it. And that's, sometimes I would jot down an idea or something, but there were entire months where I really didn't look at many of the PDFs, or I didn't do a whole lot with it. I just kind of made a little to-do list for myself of this is what I'm going to look at later. And if there was something in the audio where I was like, oh, I want to check out the resource, then I would do it. And I would download the resources so that I would just have them to kind of flip through. But it was kind of shocking to me how at the end of each, I don't know if this is even still a part of the club, but every there were these quarterly reflections built in.
Mm-hmm.
And I printed out that quarterly reflection at the end of each season. I might have done one late or something, but I think I like pretty much did that at the end of each season. And I looked through at the suggestions and the summaries of the ideas, and I kind of just highlighted like what I was doing and put little like stars next to things that maybe I still wanted to try either later this year or next year or something. And at just that little bit of a reflection, I was shocked by actually how many shifts I'd made over the course of the year. And tracking my hours did shock me, where I was like, oh my gosh, I worked like 43 hours this week and I got everything done. I mean, it's so it's like that slow but steady kind of approach. And I will say, if you're going to join the club and think that by like adding more of these strategies that you're going to somehow lessen your workload, I wouldn't go into it with quite that mindset. I would go into it with the mindset of, I need to replace some of what I'm doing. Like, what do I want to let go of that's not working? Because you're going to have to let go of things in order for yourself to like move on to new structures and new mindsets. If you are just going to try to like add on more stuff, then I think you won't be able to like embrace the club. But if you're willing to look at what you're doing and like slowly let go of the things that aren't working and slowly add in new things that are going to work better, then that transition can absolutely happen. And I do think that like the club has resources for everyone, no matter the context. There's going to be certain things that work a little bit better for different people and certain things that speak, to someone maybe a little bit more or a little bit less. But if you're willing to like try new things and, kind of really like listen and absorb that material, then I think you'll really get a lot out of it.
Yeah, I think you're so right that it's not about doing more or adding things. And a lot of times it's not about doing hardly anything at all. Like the fact that you were listening on a consistent basis, I think is what helped you internalize these mindsets so much. Because clearly, I mean, you have internalized basically everything that I've taught through the program and then totally made it your own and applied it to this wide range of circumstances, which is like, as a teacher, that's like the best thing you could ever want from a student, right? Like someone who like gets it all and then makes it their own. Like that is just, it's amazing and so rewarding for me to hear. And I feel like it's not about going in and planning on doing a whole lot of stuff. Like I planned it as a year-long program because you need ongoing. You need someone to keep telling you these things over and over again in different ways and applying them to lesson planning, applying them to grading. And so that it can sink in and change the way that you think. And that really is my goal for 40 hours, to help teachers think. You may not even realize that your thinking has changed, but to think about your work in a new way where you have this clarity about what matters, what makes a difference, what's worth investing your time into, and then having the confidence to move through that. And that's what I really hear from your story. I hear clarity and I hear confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, great stuff. I am so grateful that you shared all of this. I'm so grateful for all of your help with 40 Hour. And I would love to close out the show with a takeaway truth. What is something that you wish that every teacher who's listening to this understood about maximizing their time and staying focused on what works?
Yeah. So one thing that you say that I like tell myself a lot is how rest is not the opposite of productivity, but it's the catalyst for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll kind of add to that. Like joy is another catalyst. Like finding joy, finding like energy from happy moments. Like that's not something that you deserve after you finish your work. It's not something that you earn. It's not something that you only get to do on your breaks or only over the summer. It's not something that you can only save for, a class party or a celebration. It's not something you get to have just, when I'm less worried and less anxious, then I can be happy. it's not something that's only available to you when things are going well. Like, it's something that can be kind of mixed in with all of the other feelings you have, like joy can be embedded into the everyday. Focus on the joy, focus on what you can control. Like, laughter's the best medicine, and don't take that away from yourself. It's really going to be the thing that helps you keep going.